I know I'm as excited as you are. This is an educational program that I assembled on somewhat short notice for the Ada Gem Mineral and Fossil Club for our August meeting. My focus here is on my favorite sedimentary rock type, the microcrystalline or cryptocrystalline silicate, often biogenic in origin, known as Chert. I'll talk about the rock type generally, and then we'll take you through a brief survey of Chert-bearing units in Oklahoma, and we'll finish by showing and describing some specimens that I've gathered from hither and yon. The U.S. Geological Survey defines Chert as a hard, extremely dense or compact, dull to semi-vitreous microcrystalline or cryptocrystalline sedimentary rock, consisting dominantly of interlocking crystals of quartz less than 30 microns in diameter. Coming from the USGS, I don't doubt that this is an authoritative definition, but it does leave some questions unanswered regarding other rocks that share all those characteristics and can thus be described the same way. The list is ample but reducible to 3 items in addition to Chert: flint, jasper, and agate. I suggested reducible since there are plenty of variations on each of those, often known under trade names or colloquial usages. So I'd say the problem lies in distinguishing Chert from those others. Unfortunately, there's little consensus as to how to draw the distinctions, but I'll share my views on the matter, and I'll start by invoking yet another term which should prove useful. That word is Chalcedony, and it has both a general and a specific meaning. The specific meaning applies to an often gemstone quality deposit that exhibits a degree of translucence and botryoidal crystalline habit. But more generally and more usefully, chalcedony means any microcrystalline or cryptocrystalline sedimentary rock whose chemical profile is mostly silica, and I'll thus use it as my umbrella term that includes the rest. It would probably be clearest if I were to start with agate. The distinctions between agate and the other 3 forms of chalcedony, Chert, flint, and jasper, lie in its degree of translucence and its patterning. It's generally agreed that agate is the chalcedony that is at least somewhat translucent and often exhibits banding typical of cavity fill. Sometimes that banding will shade off into macroscopic crystals lining a partly open cavity, in other words, a geode. It need not exhibit such banding, however, to qualify as agate, and some agates include dendrites of some alien mineral in a basically semi-transparent matrix. In the gray area that lies between agate and the others, one sometimes finds these qualities shading off into each other, such that one part of a single-hand specimen might be described as more agate-like and another part cherty. If translucence, or lack thereof, is to be the primary guide, then it remains to distinguish Chert from flint and jasper, all of which are opaque in not too thin section. A good part of the confusion is terminological. I'm not sure that I've ever seen jasper, however brilliant, that couldn't be described as brightly colored Chert. And flint is often distinguished from Chert colloquially by nothing more than its grayish color, although some specialists would say that it's the form of chalcedony that forms in chalk. Anyway, I think I've whittled those distinctions down about as far as I care to, so I'll move on to the question of how Chert forms. Chert does not form in isolation. It is a rock found within other rocks of a different type. It is a silicate, silica being the silicon dioxide that is the foundation of all forms of quartz, along with many other related minerals, the feldspars, for instance. Most of the cherts that are found locally formed in limestone, but one can also find them in other kinds of sedimentary deposits as well, or even as cavity infill in igneous structures if the circulating hydrothermal fluids were sufficiently turbid with accessory minerals. I indicated earlier that chert is often biogenic in origin. That's because one of the main contributors of silica to sedimentary deposits is the spicules of sponges. If it's hard to imagine immense deposits of chert being fed by the tiny offerings of modest sponges, don't forget that the immense chalk deposits exposed at the English Channel are a fine-grained limestone whose tiny grains are the calcareous shells of innumerable minuscule photosynthesizers that have been at work in Earth's oceans for hundreds of millions of years. And sponges have been around about twice as long as coccolithophores. The chert forms in beds or nodules, usually within limestone deposits, since the same marine environments that sustain sponges also are typically rich in animals with carbonate exoskeletons, and all that becomes the basis of the vast fossiliferous deposits of limestone and chert all across the face of the planet. The USGS publishes a complete catalog of chert-bearing geological units in every state, and the list for Oklahoma includes items in 4 geographic locations: the Arbuckles, the Ouachitas, the Ozarks, and an area near Enid. Those are, of course, units where the chert is found in situ. But if chert is your thing, there are myriad other places to collect it, including just about every stream bed, floodplain, and ancient riverine deposit in the state. Those, of course, are all distally transported chert clasts, and since they yield some remarkable specimens, I'll show you some of those, along with the native chert that I have at hand. Some of the oldest cherts in the state hail from the Ordovician period Viola limestone in the Arbuckles and the corresponding Big Fork chert in the southern part of the Ouachitas. There are more recent cherts found in both uplifts, including some beautiful white chert that I gathered near Fitztown, chert of Pennsylvanian age that includes some splendid coral fossils. The greatest variety of in situ cherts to be found regionally are in the Ozark uplift, including a sizable portion of eastern Oklahoma and on into Arkansas and Missouri. The Ozark Plateau covers a much greater areal extent than the Ouachita Fold Belt, and rocks exposed at the surface range all the way in age from the lower Ordovician in the north-central part of Arkansas to the late Pennsylvanian in the Arkoma Basin. The cherts from that region exhibit a wide range of color, pattern, and the workability that was so essential to hunting cultures who lived in the region. Among the most distinctive of those cherts are the Reed Spring chert and a tectonically fractured brecciated unit that yields those valuable ores that made the tri-state mining district a thing. The type locality for the former is Reed Spring, south of Springfield, Missouri. The mappable unit is very broad in areal extent and includes prominent outcrops in eastern Oklahoma. The other significant chert-bearing member in Oklahoma is a region of the Garber Sandstone near Enid, and I'm afraid I can't tell you anything about that one, not because I know too much, but because I know absolutely nothing. The alluvial deposits of chert clasts that can be found all over the state include a couple of particular interest. One is the quaternary alluvial deposits of the Canadian River floodplain. There, the most sought-after silicates are an unusually beautiful, richly hued chert known colloquially as Alibates Flint, although I don't think you'll find many geologists arguing in favor of that Flint designation. The distinctive chert originates in the Texas Panhandle north of Amarillo in an area that has been quarried for that material for well over a millennium and a half by local people who found it both beautiful and highly workable, and tradable as well. Artifacts made of Alibates Flint have been found as far away as Ohio. If you're unaware of how that material got its name, the story in a nutshell is that when those ancient quarries were first researched by the Smithsonian Institute, the lead archaeologist worked in close cooperation with the foreman of the large ranch where the quarries were located. The foreman's name was Alibates, and the formation was named in his honor. I've heard Alibates Flint called by the probably more appropriate name of Alibates Chert, and have also heard Alibates agatized dolomite as a designator. And since that reopens the topic of agate, I'll spend the rest of this presentation on my favorite ancient alluvial deposit of chert clasts, the Boley conglomerate of the Vamusa Formation. I speak, of course, of the celebrated Boley Agates that are eagerly collected by many members of the Ada Gem Mineral and Fossil Club, as well as plenty of others locally. Boley agate is, I have discovered, a fairly broadly applied term, but my focus will be on the most beguiling of those chert breccias, the ones composed of multicolored chert either broken tectonically and healed in situ by circulating silica-rich hydrothermal fluids, or transported minimally before re-cementation. The important thing is that the cementing medium is itself silica, and commonly exhibits the translucence and banding of agate, which is what makes Boley agate both a bona fide form of agate and a beautiful chert breccia. To this short list, Alibates Flint and Boley agates, one must add two other distally transported cherts found in this region. One is those fascinating Oolitic cherts found along Clear Boggy Creek, just a few miles south of Ada and elsewhere. I'm not sure what to say about those, but I'll show you a few in a few minutes. And the other is, perhaps counterintuitively, petrified wood. Very little of the petrified wood found in Oklahoma is found in situ. Almost all of it has been transported from who knows where. As far as its composition goes, what is it if not chert? Chert is, after all, a mineral-like mass that replaces other material either by steadily accumulating and coagulating in a carbonate deposit, or replacing some other more vulnerable material, molecule for molecule. That's why the cellular structure is preserved in so much high-grade petrified wood, and the material you're looking at is chemically identical to the chert that I've been describing. At the very least, enlarging the definition a little brings more into the purview of the chert aficionado. At this point, I'll go off script and we'll show you a few specimens. And I'll also tote these to Thursday's meeting so you can handle them and examine them under magnification if you wish. Whenever I present things like this, I usually like to start with the oldest geological period represented. I'm not sure why that is. I probably couldn't justify it if pressed on it. I have cherts here from a number of different locations, so I will show them to you from oldest to most recent. The oldest that I have here are from an Ordovician period formation, exposed at a road cut, fairly new road cut, kind of northwest of Eureka Springs, Arkansas, on US 62, if you ever want to visit. I'll start with the piece that I showed at the beginning of this video. It's a fairly large chunk, about 7 inches at its longest dimension, and as you can see, pretty brilliantly banded, nodular. And I'll rotate it so that you can see what we've got over here. A lot of these cherts are fantastically complicated. All kinds of interesting flow patterns. And I can just imagine those silicates just kind of oozing into each other, coagulating in the most unusual configurations with enough accessory minerals for some interesting coloration. A lot of the chert from that same road cut is brecciated. Here's a piece to illustrate my meaning. This is apparently a combination of tectonic breakage and maybe a little more movement on account of something. I don't know, maybe all tectonic. But anyway, cemented in situ then by other silicate material. So it makes for a very hard rock overall, and it tends not to break along the edges of the original chert clasts, but as a unit, which means that the chemistry is pretty consistent throughout. Here is another piece of nodular chert. This one kind of broke into a nice slab. The other side, there are voids in it where there just wasn't quite enough silica present to complete the job. It has an interesting weathering rind too, and the weathering is differential, apparently along planes of accumulation in the chert. You can see here how they're broken. Here's another large piece that shows a lot of interesting swirly features in its banding and some voids, and look at the different colors there. The mineral profile of the silica-rich hydrothermal fluids that were depositing these nodules were also rich in accessory minerals, and that changed from time to time depending on weathering conditions on continents and deposition in marine basins. What it look like? That's all weathering rind there. I want to show you something that's commonly found in these cherts from that region. This again is from the same road cut. This is a nice uniform looking piece of chert. Let me locate that thing there. There we go. If I can get that up to the camera, you can see that that is a void there that has taken the shape of a crinoid stem with its columnals. And there's one other little feature here that I'll show you if I can locate it right here on the back. There are some more voids right here. Obviously a crinoid columnal had been there. I suppose the process that's represented here is something like this. The silicate material that will form the chert accumulates along with all the carbonate material that's going to form the limestone in which these cherts originally formed. But of course the limestone is carbonate and it will eventually disappear. So carbonate fossils that managed to get surrounded by chert before they could disintegrate, then later on disappeared, leaving those voids in the chert. They're kind of photographic negatives, and they're extremely common in these cherts. By the way, if you look at this one under close magnification, like 10 power magnification, you will see hundreds of visible tiny sponge spicules. Those are the source of silica that accounts, I think, for a lot of these cherts. Sponges are the most primitive animals on Earth, and they build their skeletons from silica. I think that might make them unique. There's another kind of fossilization, though, that can happen actually in tandem with the first type that I described. Here is a little slab of chert, naturally carved slab, picked up at the same location. Now here the chert is darker, and if you'll look carefully, you'll see that a lot of the fossils in it, originally carbonate fossils, of course, were later replaced with silica, but at the time of replacement, the silica was in the company of different accessory minerals, or fewer of them. But here, out near the periphery, you can see places where that infill of carbonate to heal these fossil voids never occurred. It's the same way on the other side. Here's a nodule that exhibits some awfully strange markings on its main surfaces. A fairly big piece. Now there you see chert that was obviously formed in a variety of depositional environments over time, Look at this surface. I don't know what to say about that, and I can't really capture it all that well on this cell phone I'm using for a camera. But those are not fossil impressions. Not at all. They strike me rather as some kind of pseudomorph, but I couldn't begin to tell you what. The rest of the piece is really interesting too. What else have we got here? Well, a lot of the nodules will be broken so that their appearance is thus. And they will have a weathering rind on the surface of the nodule. That is silica, but it's somewhat degraded, maybe going to Tripoli or something like that. One more from that location. This is another piece of breccia, and boy, is this one strange. It's all Chert clasts, some of them showing evidence of origin as fossils. The next pieces that I show you will be representative specimens of the Reed Spring chert, which I described a little earlier. This chert is found in southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, and eastern Oklahoma. It has quite a reach. It's chert that's found within what is called in northern Arkansas and Missouri the Boone Formation, which is a Mississippian period, mostly limestone formation. The chert that's found there usually takes the form of either beds or lenses. Now, here's a piece that is pretty typical. The black stuff on the top is actually the Reed Spring chert. Let me rotate this piece so you can get an even better view of it right there. That is very, very hard silica. And it's quite beautiful when it's polished too. For one thing, this chert is just filled with tiny ghost-like fossils and interesting markings. And it's found in a matrix of limestone. This is the limestone in which it forms. The interface between them is kind of interesting too, because that intermediate zone there is a weathering rind of the chert, and that happens while the chert is still in situ before it's ever broken out of formation and tumbled in riverbeds. Here's another specimen that shows quite clearly how those little lenses of chert will form inside limestone. That's its matrix. A lot of that chert too is brecciated. This is obviously a tectonic breccia. Those pieces have moved hardly at all. They were fractured and then infilled by silica cement, and under magnification you would be able to see that this is not all that different from the kind of cementation that took place in the material known as Boley Agates. These cherts, like others, often form in nodules. This one hasn't been broken at all, and you can see a rather interesting, somewhat Baroque shape to that. And one of the features that is often true of Reed Spring chert is that it has preserved trace fossils. This is a rough piece, just plucked right out of a stream bed, and all those little black dots there are burrows that have been infilled by silica that was very rich in accessory minerals, so that part of it shows up in striking relief, not physical relief, but color relief. I want to show you what this looks like when you polish it. I have a bunch of these, and I can just pull them out all day, and I'll show you a few representative pieces. This is a piece that is tumble polished. That's Reed Spring chert, and those distinctive markings are all filled burrows. The luster is quite high in the entire piece. Some of those traces even have feathery looking little markings where tiny feet have trod. Look at that. This is some of the most beautiful chert I know. The reed spring chert. Oh, what was that? It's an interesting surface, isn't it? Fossil rich. There you go. More of the same. These all came from near Beaver Lake in northern Arkansas. An interesting piece. And here's one with a lot of feathery little tracks. See that? And one more. I can't get over these. I'll bring some of these to the meeting and you can handle them. This chert has been used for implements, for artifacts that are found all over the region. I've seen spear points made of reed spring chert, and they're really spectacular. What I want to show you next are some pieces of chert from the Tri-State District. This is all brecciated chert, and this is the source rock for all of those ores that were mined back around the beginning of the 20th century and then well on into it. This is fascinating stuff here. This is the chert that is all fractured and healed. And I want you to look at this area right there. Man, what a jumbled mess that is. That appears to be a bunch of chert clasts that have been cemented by dolomite, the mineral. I'll show you more in just a second. I'll bring these to the meeting. Here's one that's even more intriguing. All those little chert clasts and dolomite cement, I'm pretty sure. I don't have an explanation for how that could have happened, but one possibility is this, that it represents a conglomerate at the base of an unconformity. But for that region, I just doubt it. I think the deposition of this was, well, I thought it was continuous. Don't know for sure. Here is a piece that is almost completely covered in little pale pink dolomite crystals. That is the cement that you find in a lot of these chert breccias from the Tri-State District. These all came from Pitcher. Okay, let's take a look now at these bigger pieces. Here is a big piece of white chert over here that has been cemented with some other white chert over here, but this black stuff in the middle. And let's turn this one around and you can see a partly hollow, partly filled crinoid fossil there in the chert. More of that dark black cement. Really typical of the pieces in that area. That brilliant little white fleck there at the middle is degraded calcite. Now let me get up close here, and you might be able to tell that this piece is just covered in tiny red sphalerite crystals, especially in there. And here is a piece in which the chert has almost completely disappeared under a welter of sphalerite crystals. And there's some degraded calcite there, the brilliant white stuff. I'll bring these to the meeting as well. I don't intend to regale you all night with this stuff, so I'm going to close by showing you a few pieces from Fitztown, or just south of Fitztown. To the best of my ability to determine, and this is based on the Oklahoma geologic map that I'm looking at, these specimens might very well be Pennsylvanian in origin. It's a very beautiful white chert, and this contains some spectacular fossil negatives of coral. So I'll bring these to the meeting as well, along with some others that I thought I might show you tonight, but won't. This first piece is a fairly large piece that will illustrate some of the things that I want to show you. Now there's the basic color of the chert, and you look carefully and you'll see all kinds of fossils there, and some of them are fossil voids, while others are fossil infills. And in fact, this entire region right here, that thing right in there, that appears to be one huge mass of something living that was surrounded by the chert as it was forming. Remarkable. Here is a piece that exhibits very well the kind of detail that you end up seeing in these fossil negatives. So look at that. As I say, I think this chert is probably Pennsylvanian in age. Another piece. Check out the fossils in a variety of conditions and a variety of fauna. And one more. Here is a piece that shows very clearly the essential beauty of this chert, and over here are some handsome negative fossils. I'm really blown away by this material. I don't want to wear out my welcome by holding you over long with this, so I will leave the rest to your imagination. I will bring along a few specimens on Thursday, specimens that I've collected of Oolitic chert, for instance, from Clear Boggy Creek just south of here, and maybe some Alibates Flint and Boley Agates. I believe those are all plenty familiar to our club members, but it would be nice to see a few pieces in person. Anyway, look forward to presenting this at the meeting.